What is up, guys? Farmer Taiki here, and today I'd like to give my thesis for Tomb Finance. So if you like the content, please like and subscribe and leave a comment in the comment section below. So let's get started. So this is going to be the agenda of the video. I'll give a quick overview of Tomb Finance. Then I'll give my thesis for it, right, and why I think it's interesting. And I'll be comparing this farm with that of Dinoswap, right? And I'm going to kind of call this Dinoswap V2. If you don't know, right, if you haven't been following me, I think back in July, I was in this farm called Dinoswap, and I had a pretty interesting thesis on it. I'll go over that later. But essentially, it was a way for us, the retail plebs, to dump on the VCs because the VCs were game theoretically incentivized not to dump on us in the first couple of weeks of launch, which is interesting. And then lastly, I'll go over the game theory aspects of it. And as a professional poker player, or I was one like before I started crypto, I have a pretty good understanding of game theory. And I feel like the Nash Equillibrium argument for Tomb Finance is interesting. Definitely high risk though. So I'll give a quick disclaimer. And the reason I'm wearing the farmer hat and I brought my rig is so you don't take me too seriously, right? Just to, just add a comedic aspect to this video because in my thumbnail, I feel like I'm this guy, right? I feel like I'm this guy when I go over Tomb Finance because I feel like my conviction for Tomb Finance might seem crazy, but I feel like it's justified. But, I'm open to any counter arguments that people might have. But anyways, I consider this to be a game, right? And a very high risk farm. And thinking of this as a game might help you understand this better, right? Because I just find the game theory behind this really, really fascinating. So obviously, my channel has grown to a size where I feel like I could affect markets. And for a farm like this with a questionable long-term narrative, I don't want there to be any conflict of interest when it comes to, like this YouTuber is pumping and dumping, right? So I feel like to eliminate any conflict of interest and to show my conviction for this farm, I'm not going to sell any of my position until, I guess, the end of the month, right? So essentially you get to dump on me for the next month or so. Obviously you don't have to, sell the 30th, right? Because if everyone does that, then, it's going to ruin the farm and whatnot. But, just letting you know that me personally, I will not be selling my position until the end of the month, essentially. So, and you might be wondering, like, a month, like that's nothing, right? And I feel that. However, a month is a very long time frame for this type of farm, right? Because it's an Algocoin, right? So a month is like 10 years. It feels like, right? And the reason I think this, and the reason I give this date is because I do think it's possible that it can last that long. And I asked myself a lot of questions, and I thought really deeply on whether I wanted to make a public video on this or not, just because, it's very high risk and I don't want people getting wrecked. However, I'll just give my thesis on it and I'll announce that, I'm not going to sell for the next month or so, and you can evaluate this for yourself, right? I'm simply providing the research. You make your own decisions. You're clicking the buttons, right? I'm not clicking the buttons for you. You're the one throwing money around, right? So, do your own research. Definitely not financial advice, right? Like if you're taking financial advice from a guy on YouTube wearing a farmer hat and a rake, like what are you doing, right? So before that, I kind of want to quickly go over my thoughts on risk, right? Because farming and investing markets, everything is about taking risk in hopes of outsized returns, right? Calculated risks. And everything I do in crypto, I think about it in terms of expected value. EV is a term I use a lot, and it's really how I think about things. For example, if some play, right, a hypothetical play has an 80% chance to go to zero, but a 20% chance to 10x, it is mathematically plus EV, right? Sure, 80% of the time you lose every dollar, right? It's -1. However, 20% of the time you make $10. So the EV of this play, hypothetical play, is 1.2. So like mathematically, anyone that's rational should partake in this bet. However, 80% of the time you lose your money, right? And you might not be happy. But if you approach things from a more mathematical standpoint, it might make sense to take on more risk in the future. And obviously, whether a play is good or not is only obvious in hindsight, right? And I argue that this is controversial view, right? I feel like pretty comfortable with taking on outsized risk, because if you're not taking on a lot of risk, then you're not gonna get crazy returns, right? People only like to invest in things that are sure bets. But if some hypothetical coin or project is a sure bet, then it would already have been priced in by now, right? If you're investing in something or betting on something with a super small market cap or a micro cap, then inherently the market doesn't believe in that project, so you have to have a higher risk tolerance to play. So, I argue that if some of your plays are not going to zero, you're not taking on enough risk, right? And some of my farms have definitely gone to zero, and I'm okay with that because I'm managing risk. And if you're early on something, you don't really have to bet big. You can start small, monitor it, and add more as your conviction grows. This is how I approach DeFi Kingdoms. I bet super small on it when it was like a total shitcoin. And then as my conviction grew, I bet bigger. And even though I wish I bet bigger on day one, my position is sizable, where I'm like super happy with where it's been. So, I'm okay with my farms going to zero. It's all about risk tolerance. And it's all about like having self-awareness, right? If you're self-aware to the fact that like you would hate your life if some of your investments go to zero, then you should understand that you should not be entering higher risk farms. So maybe this is not the farm for you. However, if you're okay with maybe 1%, 2% of the portfolio going to zero, in terms of like just calculating EVs and whatnot, maybe it makes sense, right? Because one winner makes up for dozens of losers, and that's kind of how I think about it, right? I've made a bunch of 1% bets that's gone to zero, but the one bet, which is DeFi Kingdoms, like that thing is going so well that that farm, like which I took a lot of risk on early on, is going to make up for dozens of losers, right? So that's kind of how I think about risk. And bet sizing should be inversely correlated with the risk you're taking, right? If something is super high risk, that's small, right? But if you do have more conviction, you should bet bigger on that project, right? Not financial advice. Okay. That being said, you understand my risk tolerance, my risk appetite. I think about everything in terms of mathematical figures and like in some ways game theory. So let's kind of go over Tomb Finance and whatever your preconceived notions are, right? Preconceptions. Try to remove your bias, right? Because I know a lot of people will just automatically dismiss this farm as a Ponzi, and I don't really have a strong argument against that argument, that this is a Ponzi in the longer term. However, try to understand the thesis that I have for this farm, and maybe it makes sense, right? Maybe it doesn't make sense, and maybe you can like watch from the sidelines and watch me get wrecked, as people dump on me before December 31st. But just try to approach this from a more rational perspective, and then try to evaluate it for yourself, right? And I'm more than happy to hear counter arguments in the comment section below. And how I think about it is that in the short term, I think this farm makes a lot of sense. In the long term, all your bear narratives, right? Any bear narrative that you could have in like the mid to longer term, I totally agree with you, right? But try to understand the argument that I'm making here. Okay, so what is Tomb? Tomb is an algorithmic coin pegged to the price of Fantom, right? And historically, all Algocoins have failed, right? Essentially, right? I guess the ones that are alive, like we don't know if it'll fail because it's still around, but like 95% of Algocoins fail, right? And it's because there's no demand for the token, right? It's just like a short term, like Ponzi, I guess. But I'll go over it in more detail. If the price of Tomb is over that of Fantom, right? So if Fantom is $2 and the price of Tomb is like $2.1, then the supply will increase, right? But if the price of Tomb is under that of Fantom, so if the price of Tomb is 1.9 and Tomb is $2, then bonds are issued, and people can essentially burn Tomb to like buy up bonds in order to I guess make a profit when the price of Tomb gets over the price of FTM, right? And I really I really encourage everyone to read the documentation if you're interested. I'm not going to spend too much time on the mechanics. I'm more going to make an argument about the game theory of this particular farm. So I made a comment on like, let's try to get rid of our bias because, Tomb did essentially go to zero at some point, right? This is early September, and you can see that, it was holding peg. It never really went below like 1, right? This is the Tomb FTM ratio, but it went to 0, right? And let's kind of go over like what actually happened and give my commentary on it. So if you go back to August and September, Tomb had this gatekeeper system where they essentially taxed you if you wanted to sell your Tomb. Obviously, this doesn't really make any sense, right? How can you make an algo coin peg to the price of Fantom if you're gonna disencourage sellers, right? So this is the reason I didn't really enter Tomb when it initially was like brought onto me, right? Because I was like, okay, like this doesn't really make any sense. I don't want to be dumped on by the early investors and whatnot. And the exploit that happened was that someone bypassed this gatekeeper system, right? The tax system. And people were, or I guess some malicious actor was able to sell their Tomb without paying any tax. And then as soon as this happened, then there was like a bunch of FUD, right? I guess it's not really FUD because it was an actual exploit, but it essentially made everyone just sell their Tomb because everyone thought it was going to go to 0, right? And everyone sold, all confidence in the project was lost. And Austin from FTM Alerts has a really good video on this. where, on September 3rd, he was going over like the live reaction. So I encourage everyone to, hear the market sentiment, right, around Tomb Finance at the time, right? Because I mean, I'm talking about it now, but obviously it's much better to hear from people involved in it than, just me talking about it as a non-participant. So the interesting development behind Tomb Finance was that after the project essentially went to zero, Harry Yeh, a hedge fund billionaire and early Fantom investor, came and took over the project. Okay, and I don't want. I mean, obviously the easy narrative is like, what the hell, like a billionaire? Of course he's gonna dump on us, right? Like this guy's a profit maxi, and sure, like I totally understand that argument. However, this guy is not just a regular billionaire, right? This guy is an early Fantom investor, and he is long-term aligned with the Fantom project. For example, there was this Fantom developer conference in Abu Dhabi in late October. And Harry Yeh actually paid for this. He organized this, right? So he has a lot of Fantom, and he wants to see the ecosystem grow, right? So he's just a rich guy that's trying to help out the ecosystem. And this is his Twitter, right? I'll just say that he's a very eccentric figure, and he is very, very bullish every single day, right? So like I call this like the Harry Yeh pumpamentals, but he's always bullish. So like you should always. You shouldn't take everything he says at face value, right? Just understand that he's always bullish, right? And I'm gonna talk about, I guess, the bull case of Tomb, but you should always understand that, hey, like you have to consider like what could go wrong, right? Because what could go wrong is that this thing goes to zero, right? This thing could go to zero. Because if you think about Iron Finance and Polygon, like when everything was going up, everyone was up, right? Everyone had unrealized profits. Like no one had unrealized losses, but like it immediately went to zero in like 30 minutes, and people got wrecked, right? So that's always a possibility. And Harry Yeh, he's a billionaire. Like he has a hedge fund. He's been in crypto for a long time, and he's a good trader. I mean, he just makes a lot of money. And I'm actually going to link this presentation in the description below, so you can actually go through these slides, right? And if you're going to go through them again. But in the conference, in the Abu Dhabi conference, he has a 23-minute keynote on like why he's backing Tomb, right? Because I mean, for a man with this much money, with a public figure, for him to take over a project, it poses a lot of risk. So I still question like his decision to like publicly take over, right? It's very risky in general. But if you want to listen to the keynote, you can click on the link to the video here, right? It's hyperlinked, right? And this presentation is available, and the link is in the description. So I kind of want to just briefly go over all of Harry's Discord announcements, just because I think it tells a good story and where he's trying to take Tomb in the future. Okay, so this is September 8th. He essentially said, right, like I'm going to take over the Tomb Finance project, like lots of exciting developments. And then a couple of days later, he said that, essentially why he took over Tomb, because he loves Tomb, right? He really likes Tomb. And, he kind of goes over like, he just gobbled up a bunch of the supply of TSHARES and Tomb back when it was like at the bottom, essentially. And here's an interesting note, right? And this is the potential longer term narrative of Tomb Finance. Do I believe in it? I don't really believe in this, right? Just because it's very, very ambitious and very, very risky. However, essentially the argument is that FTM is very, very illiquid. Fantom has a maxed supply, right? Has a max supply, right? And 3.2 billion roughly, and 2.5 billion is already circulating. And roughly 64% of FTM is already staked, right? So there's not that much liquidity for Fantom on bridges, decentralized exchanges, and even on centralized exchanges. If you know anything about FTM, if you try to withdraw FTM from KuCoin or Binance, sometimes they halt withdrawals just because there's not enough Fantom, I guess, in their exchange. And if you try to bridge FTM from, like, let's say Avalanche or Ethereum back to Fantom, or the other way around, sometimes you can't do that just because there's not enough liquidity. So Fantom inherently has a liquidity problem, which might halt, I guess, the growth of the entire ecosystem. So he wants Tomb, right? He wants to expand the supply of Tomb so that, in this, I guess, utopia world, right? In this ideal world, if everything goes right, you can trade Tomb one-to-one with FTM. And if there's enough belief in the Tomb peg, people will treat Tomb to FTM, and it's going to create a lot more liquidity for the Fantom ecosystem, right? And I mean, I mean, I don't know if I believe in this, right? I mean, I don't know if I believe in this, right? It's a very, very, you know, ambitious narrative, but just understand that this is the narrative for Tomb Finance. Okay, so, and also, you know, he is financially incentivized also to make Tomb work, because Harry has a very, very large bag of FTM, right? He says it, right? I don't know how much, but you know, he's very, very early into FTM. And he's mentioned before, I think, in a podcast or some interview that like even he can't sell if he wanted to, right? So maybe Tomb can fix this. So you know, don't believe that. You know, I mean, one of the narratives is that like Harry's like his fund has an infinite bid on Tomb, which could be an argument, right? But you know, at some point he's gonna sell. At some point he's gonna want to cash out, right? So just understand that. I'm trying to give the bull and bear case here. And also, Harry announced a DAO fund for Tomb for the short, mid, long term. I think short is under a month, mid is a few months, and long term is over 6 months. And the goal of the fund, right? This is a fund managed by his hedge fund, right? Is to help maintain the peg and but also to make profitable investments and trades for the Tomb Finance project, which of course will help to maintain the peg. So essentially, you know, his hedge fund is gonna work on maintaining the peg and make profitable investments and trades for the Tomb Finance project. So, you know, if the treasury grows, then it's going to help maintain the peg, right? That's the narrative. And he's gonna he announced a company formed behind Tomb Finance. I feel like this is more for legal reasons, right? Like in case this thing goes to zero, he doesn't want to get sued, he doesn't want to die, he doesn't want to get killed. So I think it's mostly for legal reasons, but you know, he's taking this project pretty seriously. Okay, and he also mentioned that he's gonna form Tomb Labs, entity that's focused on the development and support of the Tomb protocol, and you know, they're gonna have partnerships with Popsicle, Scream, Spooky Swap, Spirit Swap, Zoocoin, etc. Hedge funds, market makers, and other major investors are currently looking at the Tomb project since it is one of our portfolio companies and it represents one of the best trading opportunities for Fantom right now. And their goal is to make Tomb extremely liquid, include exchange listings, as well as Tomb vaults. Right? He's like, you know, this is the Harry Yeh fundamentals. Lots of excitement for the project. There's also going to be FTMPad, right? This is going to be a launch pad on Fantom, and essentially what's going to have to happen is that if you want to participate, you have to burn Tomb to participate in the launch pad, right? So it's going to create more, I guess, utility for Tomb, right? So how does it actually work, right? This is Tomb Finance, and no, I'm not going to spend too much time on this, right? Because I don't want this video to get too long. I think it's going to be super long, but you know, if you want to learn, then you know, you kind of have to listen to me ramble on for a very long time. However, you know, if the Tomb FTM peg is over 1.01, right, the TWAP, the time weighted average price, then anyone that's staking T-share, right, is going to earn the rebase, right? So if you're staking T-share and the Tomb is over 1.01, you're going to earn Tomb, right? You're going to collect the rebase. And if it's under peg, right, 0.99 or lower, then don't worry about the burn here. You can take your Tomb, burn it, and exchange it for T-bond. And if the Tomb peg gets over 1.01, you can redeem your T-bond at a premium and profit that way. So if there's enough belief in the system, then a bunch of people can theoretically, burn Tomb, buy up T-bond, and then make money that way when Tomb gets back over peg. Okay. Now, positive rebase if the TWAP, right, the time weighted average price, I believe every epoch is 6 hours, right, or 6 or 8 hours. Don't quote me on that. I should know that, but anyways, I think 6 or 8 hours. Positive rebase if it's under 0.99, bonds are issued. You have to stake your T-shares to collect the rebase. So you know, this is the this is a Tomb FTM ratio. If the ratio is over 1, then that means the price of Tomb is above that of FTM, right? Which means that, you know, this Tomb printer is going on. So as you can see, you know, he took over the project and it chatted up, right, back here. And you can see that, you know, I'm kind of going to go over the sentiment of this project, but initially for the first couple of weeks, you know, there was doubt in the ecosystem, right? Like people just kept selling Tomb, it's like when it like approached, you know, like the 1 ratio, right? However, when like FTM went on its parabolic run, everyone was like, oh my God, like Tomb, I love Tomb, yay, right? And everyone just printed it. And then when FTM corrected like 50%, you know, it went back to peg, right? It didn't go back, it didn't go under peg, which was really impressive, and which is why it really interests me, because sure, like these things can work well on the upside, but can it do well on the downside, right? And this thing survived a 50% crash in the price of Fantom. And most recently, you know, there's a lot of euphoria in Tomb Finance. And I like to go over this, right? But Algocoins are based on a belief system, right? If the DAO fund can like back it, right? Like his hedge fund can back it, and the market believes that there is this bid by Harry and his hedge fund, right? And if you believe that, Harry's gonna keep working on this project to make sure that, it keeps succeeding for, 1 month, 2 months, 3 months, etc., then maybe this thing can go on for some time. And this is a sneak peek on the game theory behind this project, which I'll go over in the latter part of the video. So this is the farm aspect, right? This is the masonry. So you can stake your T-share to earn any tomb rebases if the TWAP is over 1.01. I took this screenshot a little over a week ago, so it was closer to peg, but yeah, I mean, there's been rebases every single day. It's pretty wild. And because there's been rebases every single day, the price of T-share is just going up. Yeah, I mean, it's just going up, right? I consider T-share to be the greed token, right? People want the positive rebases to feel good, right? And it makes sense. However, I'm not really interested in accumulating T-shares, and I could be wrong, right? And if I'm wrong, I'm gonna miss up on some potential gains. However, I have my own narrative for this, and I have my own thesis on this. So for me, I'd rather not accumulate T-shares and use T-shares as a way to accumulate more Tomb FTM LPs, right? Because T-share, yes, you stake it to earn the rebase, but it's also a farm token. So anyone that's being a liquidity provider for Tomb FTM gets T-shares, right? And at 255% or 0.7% APR, daily APR. This screenshot is also outdated, but it's roughly in this ballpark. And I took the screenshot last night, but right now the daily APR is 0.74% at 1400% APY. Interesting. So essentially the interesting thing here is that if you believe in the peg, you can technically earn 0.74% per day on FTM price exposure, 1400% APY. And don't get me wrong, like I don't plan on holding on to this for like 12 months, right? I'm not that crazy, right? I'm crazy, but I'm not that crazy. So these big APYs, it's kind of tricky, right? Because I mean, like how long do you participate in this game? But just understand that, and this is my thesis. This is my way to accumulate more FTM because I do think it's undervalued, right? Not financial advice. I don't care to catch the bottom, right? I'm a farmer. I just want to earn yield on the assets I'm bullish on. So, yes, in a perfect world, I just want to long the bottom. But if I can earn 0.74% a day on FTM, at roughly $2 or $2.10 or whatever the price is right now, it seems like a decent way to DCA in. Okay, that's my idea. And like I mentioned, my thoughts on risk. You have to take on risk for outsized returns. This is how I think about it. I believe the Tomb FTM LP farm, right, the one I'm in right now, has an attractive risk reward profile that I wanted to participate in. Okay, that is kind of my thesis. And again, right, I'm currently participating in this, right? So I do benefit from making this video, but I also didn't want to not make this video because I do think this is an interesting protocol. So that's why I'm saying that I'm not going to sell my position until December 31st. So you have like a month of buffer, right? So I'm not dumping on you guys, right? Essentially, I'm not dumping on you guys. So let's kind of go over the fundamentals of Tomb, because in a utopian world, this is possible, right? There is, if you run like 100,000 simulations for this universe, maybe there's 100 universes where, Harry's dream comes true, right? And maybe I'm too bearish or too bullish, or I don't know how to call it, but, FTM does have a liquidity problem, right? And maybe like, I don't know, maybe the Fantom Foundation can like get rid of the max supply to fix this problem, but maybe they don't want to do that. So, if this liquidity problem is always going to be around, then, it might really hinder the growth of the FTM ecosystem. So if Tomb can actually become a derivative of FTM and be pegged to it, right, and be cross-chain and whatnot, then yeah, definitely, maybe there's a narrative to be had there. Essentially, I say all here, but 98%, 99% of Algocoins in the past have failed. They've all had their narratives. So, I would, if I were a betting man, I would say that, in under 12 months, this thing will probably be going to zero. But I'm just focusing on the game theory part of Tomb Finance. But, the risk is very high. Do your own research, not financial advice. I am wearing a farmer hat and I am holding a rake for the entirety of the video. Okay. So, like I mentioned, I don't think this is the future of finance. I'm not saying it's going to work, but, I'm just focused on the short-term game theory of participating in the game. And, Harry announced that there's going to be some partnerships with centralized exchanges, right? Partly Binance, where you can, trade FTM. I'm not really sure, or sorry, trade TOOM. I'm not really sure like what the updates are, right? It's kind of murky. It's not really that clear, what's actually going on here. But Harry has a lot of influence. He knows a lot of people, and he's actually working pretty hard to make this a thing. Okay, and my idea is that I'm assuming that Harry Yeh and the TOOM DAO and his fund can keep or they have enough firepower to keep TOOM going for quite some time, right? And this is where I guess the Ponzinomic nature of TOOM comes in, and that's why that's why I'm announcing like the December 31st date, just so that just so that I'm not like making this video purely to pump and dump. But I am saying that I believe I have conviction in this form in the short term, and I will be taking profits at some point, but I won't be taking profits until December 31st. So I don't really know what better way I could do this, but just that's kind of how I think about it. Okay, so in terms of catalysts, I think there's an interesting one. So I talked about FTMPad earlier. It's a launch pad that requires burning TOOM to participate. And there's also this argument of like, if you're like a small project and you want investments from Harry, you should go through FTMPad, right? There's a lot of narratives that could be spun up here. But first, there's going to be a trading utility token for the exchange with a cat theme, right? Maybe Spooky Swap. I have no idea. And you're going to need to use TOOM, I think, burn it. But Life will also be launched on FTMPad. More details later. So what is Life, right? It's really interesting, and like Harry Yeh impresses me every single day with like I see his vision, right? I see the vision. I see the vision, and it's pretty impressive. So let's kind of go over TOOM, right? TOOM is Life, and Life is TOOM. So quick summary. Life is an OHM Fork that's gonna allow people to bond TOOM FTM LPs to mint Life, right? So everyone loves TOOM forks, right? OHM Forks. Everyone loves OHM Forks. I argue most of them go to zero. I mean, they are going to zero. And I'm not saying Life is gonna flip anything, right? I'm not saying that. I'm just sharing the research. But I think it's interesting because for OHM Forks, most OHM Forks, they don't make sense to me. It's a cash grab, right? It's just like whoever is early, whoever makes the project gets the dump on retail. But for an Algocoin, for like TOOM Finance, I think it does make sense for something like protocol-owned liquidity, because if TOOM Finance can own their own liquidity, then it's gonna help them, I guess, maintain their peg in the future, because they're not renting liquidity. Because if 1,000 people in the world are TOOM FTM LPs, and like we can just like pull out and dump on it like any time, right? Which is a inherent risk for the protocol. However, for Algocoins, I think it kind of makes sense. So it's kind of go over here. So it's going to be a launch pad. It's going to be similar to Olympus, Wonderland, additional utility for TOOM. You can trade specific LPs. I'm assuming TOOM FTM and maybe TOOM or FTM T-share for discounted Life tokens, right? This is the bonding mechanism, and it's a bonding mechanism. It's going to be vested over a period of time, and then once the vesting period is over, you can stake it, right? 3 or TOOM, whatever. And it's going to be, the supported assets are Life, TOOM, FTM, and MAI, right? MAI is over collateralized stablecoin from ChiDAO, right? MAI Finance. There's that, and like I mentioned, protocol and liquidity, right? It's beneficial. Use case for TOOM, and if the protocol owns TOOM, right, they can move liquidity where we need it. And he has a lot of visions, right, for going cross chain and whatnot, right? So who knows, right? Definitely interesting narrative. And I boxed this part here, right? And is the coincidence that he made this post on 4:20 p.m.? I think not, right? Everything this guy does is like a meme, right? I just consider everything Harry Yeh pumpamentals. You don't have to believe, though my sentiment is that you don't have to believe in like the 6-month outlook of TOOM. You just have to believe in the short-term outlook for TOOM. Okay, and to add on to the protocol on liquidity aspect for algo stablecoins, for something like RoamDAO, right? And don't get me wrong, like I hear you guys, right? I get shilled OHM Forks every single day, and people think that I don't look at them, right? Of course I look at them, right? I just don't think it's worth my time. But for Rome DAO, you see that if Rex, right, which is an algo stablecoin, or it's kind of an algo, it's they're trying to be an algo stablecoin. I think they're like roughly 80% backed by USDC, 20% backed by Frax shares. But it makes sense for these, I guess, algo stablecoins or hopeful algo stablecoins or Algocoins in general to own their own liquidity, so they don't people don't pull out all at once and get dumped on, right? Because that's how these projects fail. Anyways, yeah, and yeah, and like I mentioned, I like Ohm, right? I'm bullish Ohm. I like Wonderland, right? But where's the innovation, right? Come on, devs, can you stop making new Ohm forks every single day with a new narrative? Because it's not gonna work, right? It's not gonna last. We need more innovation. And literally all the reply guys showed me their favorite Ohm fork. That was not the point. And I don't know if I'll enter life, right? If I just want to gain more FTM, I might just stay in the TUM FTM pool, and because I'll indirectly benefit if this thing does well. But just sharing the research. And like I mentioned, most Ohm forks, they just throw around big numbers. They get some influencers to shill it. But life has a more interesting narrative, since the protocol and liquidity for TUM actually could make sense. So I'm not saying I'm going to enter, right? I have no idea. I need to see the numbers when they launch, but just letting you know. And Olympus, for those that don't know, Olympus DAO, right? The OG, they essentially own all their own liquidity, right? They own 99.5% of the total LP supply, which is gonna help dampen price volatility and just people pulling out all their liquidity at once. Okay, so in terms of more updates, TUM is collateral, right? You can take this money market. They're not a huge money market, so I don't know if I trust them, but you can take your TUM and borrow MAI against it, right? So there's some utility for TUM, right? Working on a Chainlink Oracle, they're gonna seed a few million into MAI liquidity on Polygon and Avalanche, and trying to make TUM cross-chain. I'm not necessarily sure what the benefit of cross-chain TUM is. Or maybe if people believe that TUM is FTM, then maybe people trade TUM and whatnot. But it is what it is. And then they're working on a Chainlink price feed, and then once they receive an Oracle, they can have TUM FTM LPs or interest-bearing TUM as collateral, right? Which is interesting, right? You can I don't know if I don't have a screenshot, but if hypothetically you can take your TUM FTM LPs that's auto compounding, use it as collateral to borrow stablecoins, it could reduce sell pressure and whatnot, right? I mean, these are all narratives. I'm not really sure I believe in if this is that fundamentally bullish, right? But just understand that Harry Yeh, he's shipping. This guy is shipping, right? This guy has the money. This guy is shipping, and he's going hard. So let's kind of go over a few TUM finance strategies, right? I mean, most are basic, but there's one interesting caveat strategy that I want to go over. And what I'm doing right now is I'm just in this LP, right, in farming. I'm auto compounding on Grim Finance, right? I do pay a fee, and technically I can outperform the auto compounding rate if I do everything myself. However, I don't want to be clicking buttons every single day in front of my screen. I'd rather outsource it for me. Of course, I'm taking on additional smart contract risk, but it's pretty cool. And this position is earning me 0.74% a day on TUM FTM. Yeah. So strategy number 2 is more interesting. And this is I consider this a delta neutral strategy, and I'll kind of go over that. So let's say you can use assets as collateral, right? Bitcoin, ETH, stablecoins, whatever, right? On Geist or another money market. Then you can borrow FTM against your collateral, and then you can use your borrowed FTM to LP FTM TUM. So if you believe in the peg, right? In an ideal world, let's say the peg is real. Essentially, what you're doing is that you're shorting FTM on the money market. Let's say you're paying 5% interest rate to do that. But with that shorted FTM, you're putting it into FTM TUM and earning 1,400% APY, right? So you're essentially collecting the yield if you believe in the peg, right? Obviously, if TUM goes to zero, you just you just have a fat FTM debt that you can't pay off. So there's a lot of risk, but delta neutral strategy, maybe it's, I don't know, maybe it's interesting. I know one person that's doing this, definitely interesting. So then this is the greedy strategy, right? I call TSHARES a greedy token. Obviously, TSHARES is outperforming everything else, but I don't really care about outperforming. I'm just more interested in managing risk and doing what's I guess taking on strategy that's comfortable for me, right? For my own risk tolerance. You can stake T-shares, try to collect the rebates, right? If the TWAP is over 1.01, perhaps you can farm T-shares with FTM2, right? And instead of dumping it like what I'm doing and doing the auto compounding, maybe you can just take your farm T-shares, stake it, and collect the yield, right? But like strategy 1 is, T-shares is my yield, right? Because I'm earning T-shares and I'm dumping it. But strategy 3 is you're just like, you're all in, you're all in. And I kind of want to compare this Tomb Finance, this farm, with that of Dinoswap. It kind of feels similar to that of Dinoswap, short-term bullish, but mid to long-term questionable, right? And this is my argument for Tomb Finance. For those that don't know, I feel like my Dinoswap call back in the Polygon days, helped me build my ethos and brand and whatnot. And they'll kind of quickly go over like what Dinoswap was. So essentially, TLDR, retail, you and I, anyone that was humble enough, we made money on Dinoswap because we took advantage of the Dino tokenomics. VCs were game theoretically incentivized not to dump on retail. So let's remember Dinoswap. It was a farm on Polygon, right? I think it hit like 500 million TVL at the peak, right? People loved it. And they had a bunch of VCs, right? They had Hashed, Defiance, Digital Finance Group, Spartan Group, and a bunch of angels, right? They had Sandeep, the founder of Polygon. They had Do Kwon, Zero. I mean, they had a bunch of angels, right? And they also had these continued partnerships, with other ecosystems and whatnot. And the reason this interested me is because I looked at the tokenomics of the project and I was like, oh wait, 65 million Dino is available at launch. And how it goes is that the team and the investors, right, roughly 30% of the token supply, is vested over 12 months linearly on a per block basis, meaning that they invested money into this protocol, and for them to profit on this farm, they have to not dump Dino immediately, right? Because if they dump immediately, the confidence in the project gets lost. So the VCs and the team, even if they wanted to, they're incentivized to keep this going for at least a month or a couple of weeks. I think this only lasted a couple of weeks. I thought it would last a lot longer, but it's kind of how it happened. So I took advantage of the game theory behind Dinoswap, and that's how I made a lot of money. And hopefully most of you guys, if you didn't, if you were humble enough, made a lot of money as well. And I memed this into existence, the Stegosaurus pattern, right? I kind of predicted this for the Dinoswap. It kind of happened, right? But it dumped a lot faster than I thought it would. And back to Farmer Taiki, July 30th, right? Made a lot of money, and kind of jumping back onto my I guess the ethos of the channel, where I literally did a live stream on August 1st saying that I don't know how to ethically take profits. So starting tomorrow, this was Sunday, right? So starting next week, right? So Monday, I'm gonna take profits, right? And it was funny because during the live stream, the price went up like 10-20%, and then when I sold, I literally sold the top. I was like, guys, I literally told you I was gonna sell, and then people got mad at me for selling, which it's part of being a YouTuber, I guess. There's no way to make everyone happy, and that's why I'm gonna try my best to maintain the ethos. I didn't know if I wanted to make this video, but I feel like it's an interesting opportunity, so I'm sharing it, and I'm not gonna sell. You can dump on me all you want, dump on my face, whatever. Not financial advice, but I'm not gonna sell until the 31st. And the Tomb DAO, this is the most interesting part in the game theory. His fund is essentially backing it, right? There's a quote unquote infinite bid, and they're arbitraging the Tomb FTM ratio, buying bonds, etc., to profit, right? Of course, they're in this to make money, right? So VCs and funds, billionaires, they are on our side until they aren't. It also helps Tomb keep its peg if there's a big player backing it, because it installs confidence in the peg in the project. So feels like a Dinoswap. Once it gets too big, right? If this thing is at like $1 billion market cap, then it's gonna be hard for Harry to maintain the bag with his pure firepower. However, it's definitely an interesting farm nonetheless, right? And this guy is very eccentric. There's this meme going around, the Tomb pump. But just be humble. If you're gonna participate in this, be humble. There's gonna be so much bull posting. Take profits along the way. And don't get too euphoric. And if you look at the TVL of Fantom dApps, they're about to I think they're gonna flip everything, right? I'm not gonna count any swap because that's just the bridge, right? And 2.3 billion, it's not just on Fantom, right? Just a bridge. And I think it's gonna flip Geist and Spooky, which is gonna be a meme for sure, right? Definitely a meme. And I get a lot of questions, right? Yeah, asking about this peg, 1 TOOM to 2 FTM, and 1 T-share to 1 YFI. I mean, it can definitely get there, right? But I mean, there's nothing fundamental driving this peg, right? So don't have your investment thesis for TOOM be this new peg, right? The new peg is a meme created a narrative that the positive rebase will keep happening in order for the TOOM liquidity to go up. So lastly, I kind of want to go over the game theory aspect of TOOM finance. Because I think that's my specialty. So this is the prisoner's dilemma, and feel free to skip over this section if it's going to be too dense and whatnot. But you know, kind of going over it, the game theory behind TOOM finance and why I believe, you know, if you're well versed in game theory, this might make more sense for you. So prisoner's dilemma. Let me kind of go over this. This is a game analyzed. It's a toy game in game theory. Sorry that the screen is white. I took this from a different video, but it shows that like why two completely rational individuals might not cooperate, even if it appears that it is in their best interest to do so. So let's say there's a murder, right? There's a murder scene, and there are two suspects, right? And the prosecutors lack sufficient evidence to convict the pair on a murder, but they have enough to convict both on a lesser charge, right? So they have two suspects in custody, and they're questioning, right? Like, did you do it? Did you do it? Or did you not do it? Etc. And they're in solitary confinement with no ability to communicate with each other. And both suspects have the ability or the option to remain silent, right? To cooperate with one another, right? So if both of them say they don't do it, then maybe they don't get convicted that much. But they also have the option to rat the other out, right? Betray the other person. So this is the prisoner's dilemma, where, you know, if you're prisoner A, let's say, right? If you cooperate and prisoner B cooperates, you both serve 1 year, right? So, you know, this is one option. And if you betray, right? If you betray A and B, right? Prisoner B cooperates, right? So if you rat the person out, but B says that none of us did it, then A gets to go free, but B serves 3 years in jail, right? And it's the other way around for B, right? Same thing goes for the other side. But if both sides betray one another, they both serve 2 years in jail. Okay, so it might seem that, you know, ideally it makes sense for both. Sorry, my dog is running around. But both A and B to cooperate and be silent, because you know, like, they both go to serve for 1 year and they can just go out. However, you know that, like, from a game theory perspective, they can't talk to each other, right? So, like, do you really want to put your fate, your jail time into someone that might not cooperate with you, right? So, from a game theory perspective, what is the most rational approach? What is the Nash equilibrium, right? So let's take this from prisoner A's perspective. Assume prisoner B cooperates 50% of the time and betrays 50% of the time, right? Because there's no way for us to know. We have to assume that if you are prisoner A, that, you know, there's a 50-50 chance that, you know, prisoner B, you know, cooperates or betrays. So let's look at the EVs of, you know, cooperating or betraying, right? Because you want to maximize your EV at all times. So 50% of the time you cooperate and B cooperates, so you go to jail for 1 year. But 50% of the time, B betrays you when you cooperate and you go for jail for 3 years. So if you do the math, the EV of cooperating is 2 years in jail. But what is the EV of betraying? Well, if you betray and B cooperates 50% of the time, you go to jail for 0 years, right? You just get away for free. But, you know, if both of you betray, you both go to jail for 1 year. So if you compare the EVs, right? 2 years in jail, 1 year in jail, like I guess game theoretically, you're incentivized to always betray. You're always incentivized to betray your partner because the Nash equilibrium, it's not the Nash equilibrium. The EV of betraying is much higher than that of cooperating. So what ends up happening is that, you know, if both A and B are rational, you know, if they're both rational partners, if they're both rational, participants in this game, they're always going to betray each other. And they're always going to both serve 2 years in jail, which is the Nash equilibrium, which is kind of like the game theory, right? If both A and B maximize their EV, they both betray each other. So, bridging this back to TOOM finance, perhaps we are game theoretically incentivized to align our interests with that of Harry's in the short term, right? Maybe the Nash equilibrium for TOOM finance is for Harry to keep shipping and for us to keep cooperating and, you know, slowly take profits along the way. Maybe that is the Nash equilibrium strategy for this particular farm. Like I mentioned, very, very high risk, very, very high risk. But, you know, this is a project that combines a lot of the bull market narratives, right, in one project. So I just thought it was interesting. I wanted to share it with you. Consider this a game, right? And if you consider this to be a game, it might help you manage risk better, right? And you can either participate or watch from the sidelines, right? And like I mentioned, you don't have to bet big on this, right? I mean, you really don't have to. Manage your risk. You're the one clicking your buttons. Do your own research. But you can always watch from the sidelines and laugh at me if I get wrecked, right? If I get dumped on December 30th, then like that's a meme, right? So there it is. And the peg is supposed to go up and down, right? Sure. Right now the peg is up. Everyone's euphoric, but it's going to come down. It's going to come down at some point because it's designed to go down, right? I mean, new tomb is being issued every single day. People are going to take profits. If you're going to be poo-pooing your pants, if the peg goes under 1, just like don't enter, not financial advice. But you have to understand the risks going into this, right? Like, are you going to be the type of person that's going to enter this when the peg is like 1.2 and then sell when the peg is like 0.95? Then what is your thesis? What is your conviction? So do your own research, enter this with caution, etc. And be humble, right? Don't be the iron finance meme, right? Don't be the guy. Don't be Joe Exotic, right? You want to be able to financially recover from everything that you do. Something like this can make people a lot of unrealized gains, right? But there's a chance it can go to zero. Do your own research, right? Think back to iron finance, right? Iron finance, everyone at the top was sitting on fat gains, and then everyone lost money, or like 90% of people lost money or something, right? Similar to like maybe like Snowbank or Snowdog, right? I mean, people were up a lot of money, and then it's just like, bam, right? It happened. So that is the conclusion of the video. I don't know how long this video is, but I think it's interesting. I don't really know what else to say, right? I kind of poured my heart out on my narrative, my thesis for Tomb Finance. It's one of those things where if you leave in the comment section like, hey, like this is not going to work medium to long term, like I would probably agree with you. Like I would be like, yeah, like that makes a lot of sense, right? I would agree with you. But the argument is more in the short term. Maybe, as Harry tries to make this thing work, it makes sense to help him make this thing work. And then, obviously you want to take profits along the way. So that is my thesis for Tomb Finance. Let me know what your thoughts are in the comment section below. I'm trying to do this thing where, let me actually check how long this video is. I'm kind of scared. Oh my God, it's very, very long. I'm kind of trying to do this thing, where like, I'm not going to sell until a particular date, just so I can align or just so I'm not like, being like a BitBoy, right? I'm not being BitBoy, or like Scott Milker, but like I don't really know how else to do this, right? I feel like once you have a big enough following, there's like no really great way to talk about something you're excited on, while not affecting markets. But I'm trying to do this. I mean, I did this back then as well, right? I mean, I'm like, hey, I'm gonna start selling tomorrow. Feel free to sell on, like, take profits, as I don't sell. But I don't really know what better way is there to do so. Maybe at some point I just like, I don't know. Like, I don't know. I'm open to hearing feedback. But this is a 15-minute video, and I can't believe I've been talking for 15 minutes. But hopefully this was an interesting thesis for Tomb Finance. Thank you guys for watching, and have fun farming out there. Be safe farming out there. Be humble. Please be humble, and take profits along the way. And yeah, thank you for watching.